Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. Today's presentation is discussing James Hansen's 1988 testimony before Congress, which started 3 decades of global warming hysteria. Dr. Hansen's most famous prediction from that 1988 hearing was a big increase in heat waves, which he was 99% certain about. By the 1990s, the chances of any particular summer being hotter than normal would top 50%, compared with the 33% chance of the past. The summer of 1988 was very hot in the U.S., and decades later, Senator Tim Wirth from Colorado and James Hansen admitted that they sabotaged the air conditioning in the hearing room that day. We called the Weather Bureau and found out what was the hottest day of the summer. It was June 6th or June 9th or whatever, so we scheduled the hearing that day, and bingo, it was the hottest day on record in Washington or close to it. It was stiflingly hot that summer. And at the same time, you had this drought all across the country, so the linkage between the Hansen hearing and the drought became very intense. We went in the night before and opened all the windows, I admit it, and the air conditioning wasn't working inside the room. So how did Hansen's 1988 heat wave forecast before Congress turn out? Well, he was dead wrong. 1988 was the last summer which was really hot in the U.S. The graph on the left shows the number of daily summer maximum temperature records set or tied. We had a huge peak in the 1930s, which has been unparalleled since then, another peak in the 1950s, but 1988 was the last summer when we had a lot of maximum temperature records set. And the graph on the right shows the percentage of days over 90 degrees at all U.S. stations. Once again, this peaked in the 1930s, another peak in the 1950s, but 1988 was the last summer when more than 12% of days were over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Besides his heat wave forecast, James Hansen also predicted a large increase in droughts. He said the chances of summer drought in the low and mid latitudes would be 1 in 3 by the year 2030, as against 1 in 20 in the 1950s. Once again, Hansen's drought forecasts were dead wrong. Prior to 1960, the U.S. was in drought 50% of the time, shown by these brown bars below the zero line. Since 1960, the U.S. has only been in drought 33% of the time, so there's been a dramatic decrease in droughts, not an increase. Hansen's other very famous forecast from that 1988 hearing was that there was going to be a huge increase in major hurricanes, with winds up to 225 miles per hour. Hansen's hurricane forecasts were also a massive failure. Major hurricanes with winds greater than 110 miles per hour peaked in the United States in 1949 and have been generally declining ever since. The most recent 11-year period has been the quietest on record for major hurricanes in U.S. history. In the 1988 hearing, Hansen said he was 99% certain of his forecasts, but his forecasts were actually 100% wrong. So, how did he respond to this? As a scientist, you would expect he would change his theory, but he did the exact opposite. He changed the data. The measured U.S. temperature data shows that the 1930s was the hottest. But when NASA and NOAA release their data to the public, they alter it to make it look like it's warming. But this trend is fake. It's the only reason we see it is because they changed the data. Government scientists like James Hansen do this fakery because they know they can and they can get away with it. And the reason they can is because the Democratic Party and the press have adopted climate change as an official religion. It can't be questioned, and contrary viewpoints are not allowed to be heard. Please visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.